Hey everyone, it's Maria, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I read in January. As just a short little thing, I have been trying to figure out how I want to go forward with my channel, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about books that are not the best books. So if I don't really care about a book much, I won't go on and on about it. I'm just going to move on with it so I have time for telling you about things that I actually care about. So that said, we'll jump right in and hopefully make this not too long of a video. So I read 9 books. There were 3 on audio and 6 that I read. This first one is a very short middle grade book called Pie, written by Sarah Weeks. It is our book club party book for our homeschool group. It is about a little girl whose aunt dies, I think in the first paragraph, but her aunt was a pie aficionado, but very, very good at cooking pies. And she kind of made her impact on the city by making these free pies that she handed out to everybody. But when she died, she bequeathed her recipe to Lardo, which is the name of her cat. So there's a lot of people in this book who are kind of dealing with the grief of losing Aunt Polly, but also there are people who are trying to get their hands on the recipe so they can win this blueberry festival competition. This is cute. There's a lot of twists and turns. I did not see them all coming, which was kind of fun, especially for a middle grade. It was a nice way to talk about grief with a kid. Maybe not my favorite middle grade book for that, but it is kind of a fun read, and so for that, maybe 2.5 stars. This next book is a big fat one, and it is the 3rd in the Outlander series. This is Voyager by Diana Gabaldon. My mom's raved about this series, and so I'm going through it slowly but surely because I don't do big books very often. This is the 3rd one. It's, for those of you who don't know, Jamie and Claire are the main characters in the Outlander series. Jamie is a 1700s Scottish man, and Claire is a woman who goes back in time in the first book. Well, several times, but she goes back in the first book and falls in love, meets him, and so this is kind of their adventures back and forth in the series. Again, this starts off, I don't want to give stuff away, so I won't. This ends with them in the Caribbean. So that said, you can kind of gauge a little bit from that. I really enjoy this series. Again, the language in there is vivid enough that it sticks with you. I can go a few months in between reading some of these chapters and still remember details. I think that says a lot about the writing. It's very well researched. It is raunchy and a little gritty sometimes, so if that bothers you, don't pick it up, but I've really enjoyed it. So there's Voyager. The next book is nonfiction. This is called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky, and I have wanted to read this book since I heard about it. It is kind of a nonfiction plan book set forward for her version of a plan to try and help equalize the labor in the household between those of us normally women who do the invisible work behind the scenes and maybe another partner that is not doing as much work. This is hopefully done in the spirit of togetherness, community, making things run smoother. I think it has some really interesting ideas about having this whole master task list and then divvying out these cards as they go through. I'm not sure how it will go in our home. I'm going to try and maybe check back with you at some point. Erin and I might be looking at redistributing some things around, although it's been wild with all the carpooling with kids lately. But this is it brought up some really interesting points about how sometimes one partner might have more on their plate and you have to kind of take that into consideration. So it's not fair, doesn't necessarily mean equal. And this is maybe a point of contention for some people, but I liked that because there are certain things that because of the nature of where my partner and I have decided to put ourselves in life, I'm equal and fair are not the same thing. So anyway, interesting book. If you are interested in picking this up or you already have and you've tried some of the things, I would love to know in the comments how it went because, you know, we're all trying to figure that out. The next book is Coming of Age, The Sexual Awakening of Margaret Mead by Deborah Beatrice Blum. This is one I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about because it was kind of as far as I can say. I liked the beginning. I liked the end. The middle kind of bogged me down. It is based on the letters that Margaret Mead wrote with several other people during her young adult years. So I really appreciated the letters and the way they talked about her relationship with her first husband and how they approached marriage and each other and relationships in general. I thought that was very intriguing, especially for the time that it was written. I didn't really need all of the extra characters and extra people in the book because I don't know as much about Margaret Mead. I was more in it for learning about Margaret Mead and not all of her cohorts. So for that, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but other people might enjoy it. Next up is The Lager Queen of Minnesota by J. Ryan Stradell. This is the same author who wrote Kitchens of the Great Midwest, which I really, really liked. So I was looking forward to picking this one up when I found it, especially since I have family that I love in Minnesota, and I actually do like beer. So there was that going into it. It is a fun story. There are two sisters, Helen and Edith, who in their early years had a split over some money, family issues, and haven't talked in decades. And something brings them together later in life. I'm not going to say when in the book they actually do reunite and what happens. But I found it really a very cool story about how women oftentimes have to work differently to reach their dreams. We give up lots of things for other people in our lives. We sometimes will pursue a dream in order to save people in our lives that we love. And I just thought that was really heartwarming. I will say it kind of reminded me a little bit of some of those books where there's an older person and they're just fiery spinster. I don't know. Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. Just the books where it's an older person who is rediscovering who they are, what they love, what they want to do with their lives, what their new dreams are. There's a lot of that in this book. The only thing I didn't care for, honestly, is all the talk about how the beers were made and the hops and everything. I like drinking beer, but I don't really care about hearing about the processes over and over again. And it felt like there was a lot of that in there. That said, I'm pretty sure that Stradell did the research on beer making. So if you like beer, if you like old people finding new callings in life, if you like some intriguing family relationships and family dynamics, go ahead and pick this one up because it'll be a fun one to read. Next up is Good Talk by Mira Jacob. Several of you have talked about this book, and I am super, super excited to say that I also really loved this book. It is a graphic novel, or graphic memoir novel, I guess, written by a woman who is Indian American, and she is in a marriage with a white man, and they have a biracial child together. She talks about her feelings after 9/11 and how she was treated. She talks about her feelings after the 2016 election. She's talked about conversations that she had to have with her son about who he was and how that did or didn't fit sometimes into a neat, clean, tidy package when it comes to dealing with other people. She talked about her talks with other friends that she's trying to figure out how to parent while having these tough questions herself. That was my favorite part because I feel like a lot of us are at that point where we just don't even know what to say to answer questions that we don't know the answers to. We feel like we should have something and we don't, and it's getting murkier. I really appreciated this book. I thought if you want to look the illustrations are pretty simple, but again, I really thought the content in here spoke for itself. My brother-in-law, who is white, is married to an Indian American woman, and I've had similar conversations with her, and I imagine that she and I at some point will probably talk about this book as well. The last three books that I read were on audio, and the first one was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. This, for me, it's Rick Riordan. Most of you probably have heard of it before. I have liked Rick Riordan books. I really like the Kane Chronicles a lot. This is the first of the Percy Jackson series, and my boys really liked it. I thought it was not as good as Kane Chronicles, to be honest, but I've heard from several teenagers in my life that it gets better, so I'm going to stick with the series. probably slowly, but I'll stick with it. So I'm not going to say too much about that other than I really like the Kane Chronicles better. Next up is Made by Stephanie Land. This is a really great book that a lot of people have been talking about. It was awesome on audio. It was read by the writer of the book herself, if I remember correctly. I think that's right. I really appreciated this book because it talks a lot about the starting up from backwards almost. Like you're already 4 steps behind and you're trying to get ahead, and one little thing will come along when you're in poverty and knock you again 2 more steps backwards, and so you can never continue to get ahead. Because she is a white woman and she does address, that there are other things that make it even more complicated for people in poverty, like race or even lack of family structure. She didn't have as much family supporting her either. But reading this book reminded me a lot of a thing my church did called the Cost of Poverty Experience, where we had different people who work with that population of trying to kind of get out of poverty. And they had different stations set up to talk about, here's how much money you would have. These are the different obstacles you're going to face. And then you had a certain number of minutes to try and deal with each problem. And it got increasingly, more complicated and more stressful. Obviously, that's a very, very small microcosm, safe environment example to try and figure out what the cost of poverty really is. And I think, again, in Made, I felt a little bit of that stretch and that pull of how frustrating it is for somebody who is trying to get ahead, especially when they have a daughter that is sick and they're trying to figure out what the best thing to do is and they don't feel like they have options. I think it's a really great book for people to read. I will be looking again for more books like it, told from other perspectives, because I think that's important. It's not a one-person story. It's unfortunately a very complex issue. Hopefully, if you do get a chance to read that book, you might ask questions differently of lawmakers and of family members who are quick to judge. And yeah, so it was a good book. The last book I listened to, I guess it was one of the first ones, was on audio, and it's On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. She wrote, no, she didn't write Dear Martin. She wrote, I'm not remembering the name of it. Anyway, On the Come Up, it was really great. I listened to it on audio, and I was very glad I did, because especially when it got to the rap portions of the book where it's a young girl who's a teenager and she is a rapper. Her dad was a rapper and was killed by a gang growing up. And so she's trying to kind of make it big for her family and for herself, while also kind of dealing with the shadow of her dad and what people thought of him, what people think of her, because she goes to a school where she is the minority. And so she's kind of living in 2 different situations and making choices based off of that. It's a little bit of coming of age because she's dealing with some of those changing feelings and relationships. I really, really loved this book. I love the characters in it. The narrator did a great job. I didn't realize it until about halfway through, but because I was listening to it on like 1.5 speed, the raps were even faster, which I thought sounded even like more impressive. But then later I realized like, oh yeah, I'm listening to it even faster than it's supposed to be, which was kind of funny. So On the Come Up, I really recommend, especially for Black History Month when you're considering what books to choose. If you want more of not a fun book. It was fun on some things, but a book that's more, less nonfiction and more fiction, I really highly recommend On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. It was a good read. So that is all that I read in January. If you've read any of these, go ahead and tell me in the comments below. If you have any suggestions on what you think I should read for Black History Month, I'm going to be releasing that video hopefully soon. I had some hard family stuff happen in the last few weeks, so I'm going to be changing up a little bit about what I'm reading for Black History Month to make it a little bit lighter. But that said, I will talk to you later. Bye.